Today we're going to be talking about a primer on inclusive education. I am Dr. Jackie Kearns from the University of Kentucky Human Development Institute. I represent ILSA, which is Inclusive Large-Scale Standards and Assessment, but mostly having to do with school-age children with intellectual disabilities in all aspects of school life. This version of a primer on inclusive education was updated in 2014. With our motto, educate, advocate, and innovate. I'm glad to be with you today, and I look forward to our presentation and discussions at some point in time. Thank you for having me. The training objectives for today are as follows. We hope that participants in this training will identify key principles of inclusive education, identify instructional and curricular adaptations for individual students to make the inclusive education opportunity successful, identify roles and responsibilities for the adults involved in the inclusive education, and identify strategies for collaboration to meet the needs of all the children in the general education classroom. So we're going to talk a little bit about what inclusion means. Inclusion means all children learning in the same school and classrooms with the services and supports necessary for them to be successful there. All children participating in all facets of school life, from academic instruction, extracurricular activities, as well as regular school routines and social opportunities. So inclusion means all children participating, not some children participating in some activities, but all children participating in the activities that they're really interested in. So all facets of school life are available to all children. In fact, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, requires that each public agency ensure that, to the maximum extent appropriate, children with disabilities are educated with children who are not disabled. The removal of children with disabilities from the regular educational environment occurs only when the nature or severity of the disability is such that the education in regular classes with the use of supplementary aids and services cannot be achieved satisfactorily. This means all kids. This means kids with significant cognitive challenges. This means children with physical challenges. This means everyone. And the supplementary aids and services have to be in place before the removal, before consideration for removal happens, not, oh, well, we don't think he's going to make it, so therefore we're going to do. You have to try it, and you have to put those services and supports in place before you remove to a more restrictive setting. So today we will, in the presentation, we talked about some objectives, but we're also going to identify some important supports needed for inclusive environments to be successful, identify characteristics of a supportive environment, and walk through the processes of determining supports and services with case studies for Kevin and Corey, and identify where their IEP goals can be implemented within the general education environment. So what supports student achievement? Some foundational strategies: student-centered curriculum, heterogeneous grouping, cooperative learning, and peer tutoring are all foundational strategies that allow students of all abilities to participate meaningfully in a general education environment. In addition, we have some student-specific strategies that we believe help ensure success for all students. Parallel instruction, meaning students work beside each other even though their goals may be different. Naturalistic teaching procedures, so that you can adapt materials on the spot, or using procedures that are going to be effective with everyone. And then embedded skill instruction, looking for opportunities to teach a simpler skill within the context of a complex idea. So that's embedded instruction. And we want to think about both the foundational strategies that will work for all kids, and then which students need student-specific strategies of parallel instruction, naturalistic teaching, and embedded instruction. Of course, we want to think about evidence-based practices while we do this, Effective teaching behaviors as identified by John McDonald, meaning high levels of engagement. We want all students to be engaged in the instruction. We don't want kids sitting in the back of the room twiddling their thumbs. We want high levels of engagement. We want frequent opportunities to respond. If we don't provide frequent opportunities to respond, then we don't know if the student is actually engaged. We want high levels of success. We want to make those opportunities to respond successful for the student, because practicing incorrectly does not lead to success, and we know that. We want some level of systematic presentation so that students will be successful and they will know what cues to follow. And we also want to be able to give students immediate feedback on their performance, preferably successful feedback. So those are effective teaching behaviors. We know those behaviors help students with intellectual disabilities be successful in the general classroom, and we know that they have evidence base behind them. So we want to make sure that we have those in place as in our inclusive schools. So what makes an inclusive school? Safe buildings, accessible, attractive, without prejudice. Classrooms are integrated, heterogeneous, and responsive to different learning styles. And opportunity is supported by the provision of necessary resources for all students. In an inclusive school, data are used to guide curriculum using those evidence-based practices that we described earlier. Data are used to guide curriculum and instructional design. We collect data on students. We use those data to inform our instruction and reteach or pre-teach or move on to the next topic as our data indicates. We also want peer interactions and relationships that are facilitated. Students need to learn how to interact with each other, and in the right context, the relationships are facilitated so that students learn about each other and respect each other. So we want to make sure those kinds of things happen. We also want to make sure that positive behavior supports ensure that students have the appropriate social skills. Social skills are taught overtly to everyone so that everyone knows how to behave appropriately, knows what social skills are important. That's the implementation of positive behavior supports. In an inclusive school, we'll see positive behavior supports, supportive peer interactions and relationships, and where data are used to guide curriculum and instruction. Also in an inclusive school, we have strategies to help the adults. Support services, speech-language pathology, occupational therapy, PT, behavior support services are provided to address the individual needs of all students, not just the students who may be identified. A high degree of collaboration among the faculty and staff to deliver high-quality educational services. So staff are talking to each other. They're sharing their expertise. They're sharing their discipline across each other so that all children benefit from the delivery of services. A high degree of achievement is expected for all students, and teachers are prepared through professional development to meet the challenges presented by highly diverse classrooms. We know that collaborative teaching, grouping arrangements, addressing multiple intelligences, positive behavior supports, and facilitated social relationships contribute to a supportive classroom environment. So the next thing we're going to talk about are the 4 steps to ensuring that an inclusive environment is successful. Planning, accommodating, in other words, taking a look at the curriculum and saying, I don't think Johnny can necessarily do that, but how can he meaningfully participate? How are his learning goals going to be met in this environment? Collaborating, what does the special education teacher know that will help him be successful in that environment? What does the general education teacher know about the curriculum that will help him be successful in that environment? And how will we know when we're doing a good job or evaluating on a regular basis our steps towards inclusion? So the next thing we're going to talk about is how do we look at the curriculum accommodations? How do we look at the curriculum and decide how the student is going to participate in the curriculum that's going to be taught in that particular classroom. So to do that, we ask ourselves 4 questions in terms of curriculum accommodation. Will we address the curriculum just as it is, like everybody else is? There are some things in the classroom that every kid can do. So sustained silent reading for 5 minutes on the book of your choice, every student can participate in as is. Some kids, while another activity, let's say a math activity, is really difficult, and we may need to provide some material adaptations so that the students can participate meaningfully in it. Some students may need to have their goals adapted. They're not learning exactly the same thing everybody else is, but they're able to participate in that activity. For example, if everybody is learning about geometry and area, some students may need to count to find area using one-to-one correspondence, while other students may use a calculator to figure area. So goals may need to be adapted so that students can meaningfully participate. And then, of course, we think lastly about personal supports, peers and adults are the last part of the puzzle. Because adults can actually get in the way of a successful inclusion, and we want to use adults to modify the curriculum, but we want the adults to stay out of the peer interactions and the social supports. We want peers to do as much support as is possible to maintain students in the general curriculum, and only use adults as needed. We also want the adults to help all the children in the classroom, not just the students with support needs. So let's think about Kevin. Kevin's in kindergarten. The reason I put his likes and dislikes is it's always a good idea to find out what you can leverage when you're working with individual students, and then what a student dislikes, because that might have an impact on how we structure his day. So Kevin is in kindergarten. He likes TV, likes playing outside. He likes cracker snacks, computer time, circle time, and swinging. He doesn't like crowds, doesn't really eat candy. So if you were thinking about using that as a reinforcer, it probably won't work. Likes to know about changes that are going to happen. He likes to be aware of new situations that might happen. Exercise really wears him out. And he kind of tends to get lost in fast-paced activities. So we want to think about Kevin and in terms of what we can leverage for him, and what he, in terms of his likes, and what we can avoid in terms of his dislikes, as we prepare for we plan for his successful inclusion. Goals for Kevin, what we'd like to see are smooth transitions. Doesn't like change, so moving from this floor activities to the desk to lunch are a bit of a challenge. So we want to smooth out the transitions for Kevin. We want to increase his communication and his receptive and expressive language. He understands most of what he hears, and he understands when teachers ask him to do things. He can follow 2-step directions, but sometimes he needs a little extra help expressing what he intends and expressing what he wants us to know. So we need to increase his communication. We also need to increase his social interactions with peers. He does well with greeting, but doesn't do well with sustained social interaction. So we want to work on that. Obviously, hand washing is a functional skill that we want to work on as time provides, but that would be the same as all the other kids in the classroom. We want to help him in helping with the smooth transitions. We also want to help him with observing time limits, so he knows when things are finished or when it's time to move on to the next thing. And then we also want to help him improve his fine motor skills. As you know, general education environments provide wonderful opportunities for practicing fine motor skills. That's what pencils and crayons and scissors are all about. So we want to provide those opportunities for him to improve those skills, and we may have to provide some adapted equipment to help him do that more easily. So to figure out what types of accommodations we need for Kevin, we're going to use a classroom activity analysis. A classroom activity analysis lists the activities that go on in school down the left side, and then we ask ourselves a series of questions about that particular activity. So you'll notice that our activities down the side are, the first activity is free play while during drop-off time. So parents can talk to the teacher. There's free play. There are activities available. Requires the student to make a choice about an activity and go to that place and engage in that activity. So what we'll ask ourselves is, can Kevin do that as it is? Yes or no? Will he need a different types of materials, different goals, or personal support to participate in free play and while the parents chat with the teacher about what happened last night? So think about that as for Kevin. We think, and then if personal supports can't support him, are there adaptations or alternative activities that he could participate in? This is a great time for kids to engage with each other, so using peer supports in this particular place might also be really helpful. It also may be that we do both material adaptations, goal adaptations, and peer supports. But for most students, one of these will work. You'll also notice that we have snack time. So can you participate in snack time with the same goals that other students do? So circles time, calendar, colors, seasons. This is kindergarten. Can he participate as is, or will we need some materials adapted for him? He uses symbols, so we may need some materials so that he can meaningfully participate using Board Maker so that he can meaningfully participate with everyone else in the activity. So that would be a material adaptation. We may not have him count as high as everyone else does, so that means it's a goal adaptation. Those kinds of adaptations are the things that we want to think about. Theme time is the same way. We may adapt materials so that he can meaningfully participate in theme time, so that he has a fewer number of colors or a fewer number of things he has to learn. Same is true for small groups and centers. Can he participate as is, or do the materials need adapting? Do the goals need adapting? And does he have personal support? Now also remember that we want him to have successful transitions. So we may have to build in some cues for him so that across these daily activities there are cues for him to transition to the next activity. You'll also notice that we have personal care, great time to practice hand washing, free play outside, and all those kinds of things. So we list the activities across the day, and then we think, the team, the general educator and the special educator, think through that, ask each other questions if they've not worked together before, and talk about, will he be able to participate in this activity? And if no, what materials or goals or supports do we need to add so that he can participate in that activity? The next thing we want to check on is, are we able to meet his IEP goals within the context of those activities? So the tool that we use for that is an IEP analysis. Can we increase the social greetings and farewells? That's a goal. And where can we practice those? So can we do that during morning meeting? Can we do that during snack time? Can we do that during circle time? Can we do that in outdoor play? And if you'll notice that I think we have many opportunities to practice increased social greetings and farewells. Use words to request or refuse. Certainly during snack we can refuse. There's an opportunity to refuse, and people will say, you really want to teach them to refuse? Well, absolutely. Saying no is a really important self-advocacy skills, and saying it appropriately is also an important skill. You may not want him to refuse to participate in circle, but maybe there's something in circle where you ask him a question and he says, I don't know the answer. And that's an appropriate refusal. So we want to look for appropriate opportunities. Increased concept vocabulary, certainly circle time, and certainly theme and work groups and story time are where we increase concept vocabulary. Sustaining communication, past greeting is obviously can be practiced across all of these activities. Hand washing is rather limited in that it probably prior to lunch and maybe later in the day. Fine motor skills, depending on the activities that are available during morning greeting and circle time and theme work groups, we'll have the opportunities to practice then. And then, of course, transitioning between activities. We may have to build in some special cues for him to know that what we're going to do next. We may want to implement a first and then strip or some other behavior system so that he schedules so that he knows what's going to come next, and when he's finished with that activity, he marks it off the list. And then he can look at the list and figure out what's going to happen next. And those kinds of strategies will help him transition smoothly across the day. But we do this to make sure that we can practice all of his IEP goals within the context of the activities that are in the general education classroom. So that's Kevin. Now we're going to take a look at Corey. Corey is older than Kevin. Corey has an intellectual disability. He is in middle school, and he has a different type of schedule. So we'll take a look at Corey. He can read signs, cooking terms, calendar words, names of family and friends, can write personal data with types with a model. He can add and subtract with a number line. He can use the next dollar strategy to make purchases. He works independently with personalized directions, and he can follow a schedule. He learns best when he has visual materials, so we're going to want to make sure that when there are directions, that there are visual materials available for him. He does best when there's a model, something he can try out first, or that somebody can show him how to do it first. And personal directions. Some directions may need to have some of the words taken out. He may need the directions repeated after you give him time to try it out. And we've also found that pre-teaching new content ahead of time so that he knows what the concepts are and what the vocabulary is also helpful. Again, we also look at likes and dislikes so we can leverage what works for him. So you can see that Corey is very typical middle schooler. We like video games, wrestling on TV, basketball, cars, and funny movies. We also like Coke and fast food. We don't like crowds. We don't like candy. And then again, we have a situation where drastic changes and new situations we need to plan for. So we want to think about those kinds of things. He needs help with organizing materials, but what kid doesn't? I have a typical developing child with a learning disability. Organizing materials as a challenge. He may need a peer buddy if he's asked to run on errands, but that's also a good opportunity for social interactions. He's a little shy, so interactions and becoming a part of the group is really going to be a challenge. We'll need some kids to help him become a part of the group, encourage him, and be supportive of him. And he's going to need a little help with writing. So he may use an iPad with an app called Notability where he types his responses, and that is you're able to scan in the worksheet or the materials that the other students are using. It also may mean that he pastes or he glues things together instead of actually writing. But there are lots of opportunities. Or he uses speech to text. May be a little difficult because he also receives speech therapy services, but those are also all options that we're going to could use and could teach him to use that gets around some of the fine motor challenges. On his annual goals, we want him to greet others appropriately, make eye contact, describe events, objects, and interactions, ask questions of others, sustain communication, read to get information or follow instructions, use money, use a telephone, which you can tell how old this is because we would never say that now, right? He probably has his own cell phone now. And maintain appropriate social behaviors, doesn't fall apart or have a go to pieces when he transitions. So those are annual goals we want to think about in his IEP. Now, Corey is going to participate in earth science, and that's how I know this is middle school. In earth science, the expectations are to keep a science journal, conduct experiments in a cooperative group, develop science vocabulary, develop his own experiment for a science fair, monitor the class weather station for a week, view earth science video and write a report, and conduct an internet search on earth science topic. And to give you an example, earth science, a volcano is the release of stored energy from below the surface of the earth. So this is a very complex definition of a volcano, so we're going to want to take it apart for him and teach him the words that are in that definition. So a couple of strategies to think about. Plan with the end in mind. What are the essential concepts we want him to learn in earth science? Differentiate the essential concepts from details, and how closely can we approximate the learning opportunities for this student. Reduction in complexity and increase in supports and independence, and providing opportunities to practice. So again, we look at our classroom activity analysis, keeping the journal, conducting the experiment, develop vocabulary, formulate inquiry for a science fair, write a report, monitor the weather station. Those are the things. And we think through again using our classroom activity analysis. Is he going to be able to do this as other kids do it? Are we going to have to adapt the materials? I would say probably for the science journal, yes, we're going to have to adapt the materials. We may need to use an iPad with or a computer, a laptop with a typing feature. We may need to adapt the goals. His science journal may have one sentence versus a paragraph for other kids. And he may need some personal support to keep his electronic materials working. Conducting the experiment, we may have to teach him a process for that experiment, and we might use that same task analysis or process over and over. So that's an adaptation of the goals. He may have only three essential vocabulary words versus 10 vocabulary words that other students may need. We may need to, again, formulate inquiry. We may need to give him a set of simplified inquiry words for the science fair, or a very simple task analyzed step for the science fair. Write a report. We may need to use our electronic writing system, and we only use a couple of sentences versus multiple. In terms of monitoring the weather station, we may want him to do that with a peer, and they do it together. And we make monitoring the weather station a checklist or a format so that he can do it easily. And then, of course, conducting the internet search, we may need to teach him some key vocabulary, and that may also be done with a peer so that they can search together. So you can see where we've done used a variety of strategies to support Corey in participating in the science activities as much as possible. We differentiate. We really want to focus on the big ideas and get him to participate and learn about volcanoes, or learn about the water process, or learn about caves versus caverns. All of those are science concepts, but we want to be really broad in our definitions so that we can get he can get the essential concepts. And then this is just an example. For example, in his journal, the sun makes the daytime, and all planets go around the sun. Those are the essential things that make the sun the sun. And then if we need more details, of course, we can go to www.nasa.com. But essential features in earth science. There may be some other ones that we could have chosen, but 2 sentences probably says it enough. The next thing we want to take a look at is his schedule across the day. So he has reading and PE and earth science and math and computer and home ec although they don't call it home ec anymore, they call it human environmental science. So we want to look across his day and make sure he has plenty of opportunities to practice those IEP goals, greeting others, describing events. So again, we use our IEP analysis and we look for those opportunity matrix to look for those opportunities across the day. And you can see that just in nearly every class, there are plenty of opportunities to greet others, describe events, ask questions, sustain communication, read for information, follow directions, and solve problems. But we're going to have to be really mindful of those opportunities and make sure that they happen. The potential is there for them to happen, but we have to operationalize them so that they actually do happen. We also want to be thoughtful about circles of support for Corey as he engages in interactions with peers. We want to remember that social networks are really important and peer relationships are really important, and adults are paid to be in our lives. And they need to take a step back and facilitate those social networks and relationships so that they are so that the student actually benefits from them and the peers take over in terms of the social networks, and the adults step back and let that happen. So this is a quick discussion of inclusive education. I probably didn't get everything, but the thing about one question that commonly comes up is curriculum, and well, we won't be able to get it all done this time. Well, that's true, but you know, this piece of art is a solar system, and it was done by my son Wesley when he was 18 months old in preschool. And we're still doing the solar system, and he's in the 4th grade. And my 12-year-old is still doing the solar system, and he's in middle school. So you know what? It comes around again. So if we identify the big ideas and we identify the vocabulary we want students to learn, it will come around again. We don't have to do it all in one year. And if whatever we don't get this year, we'll come back and pick up next year. As long as we have the big ideas, we'll be okay. So what are we waiting for? We will have to work together. The adults will have to work together. The students will have to work together. But we'll be able to, we'll only do it when we try it. I think that might be all. And so here's some resources for you to click and find. And we are also going to leave you with a video clip of a student in a New Hampshire classroom, Tasha. Tasha has autism, and she also has some special gifts. When you look at that resource, I hope you'll think through if those teachers are practicing the elements of good inclusion that we discussed in this presentation.